think it's recording. Okay. So when replenishment goes down or is acting funky or it's being really slow, all of those things are legitimate concerns, obviously, because I know sometimes, like specifically here in Blackhawk Friday morning, when Yoppie's trying to replace the milk order is due by 8 a.m., 10 a.m., something early like that, right? So we can't wait for Coupa to run replenishment that's going to take 5 or 6 hours. There's honestly, as long as the program itself and there's nothing like broken within the program and we haven't changed suppliers or we haven't changed catalogs or we haven't touched it internally to kind of cause some issues, most of the time when replenishment isn't functioning and it's not generating that replen suggestion order, it's mostly going to be escalated to Coupa. So unfortunately for us, that doesn't really help us place orders. And as you guys know, like when we're doing big days like Cisco days, or we're doing days where we're looking at multiple suppliers, to do all of that manually is going to take just a tremendous amount of time to basically do it accurately. So there's a couple things you can do. The first one, you can always take last week's order and copy it and hope for the best. So that's probably the simplest thing you can do. You can take last week's replenishment program and look on it and you can print it out and do that work manually. I would not suggest that because that would take forever depending on how many items you're looking at. But for orders like milk, dairy, like smaller supplier orders that you're looking at, where maybe you're only looking at half a dozen things, it's doable to do it that way as well. When you're doing big orders, or if you're going to do the whole warehouse, or it's a Cisco order day or a US Foods order day, this method that I'm going to show you is probably the one that I like to use the best, because then it gives me exactly what the replan program would give me. And then the hardest part is just going in and placing the order manually, to tell you the truth. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to setup and you want to go to replenishment under the inventory section. And you want to find, I have some views already created here that basically are just looking at your warehouse with the min and the max information and the item number, right? So you find your warehouse view and you export it to Excel, and it's going to go into your inbox. The next thing you do is you find the inventory tab and you find your on-hand balances view, because you're going to need to know what you have on hand to be able to do this. And you export this into Excel, right? Relatively easy. So once you get those two things in Excel, this is where we're going to jump into Excel and do some Excel work. And there are a couple of formulas that I'm going to show you guys today. So this is the supplier report, where this is the supplier item report, which it looks like I exported the wrong list. So neat for me. So I'm going to go back and I'm actually going to export the on-hand balances. And it's going to give me my little green bar. And I think it's thinking. Cool. So here we go. So I'm going to take the replenishment information and I'm going to open it up. And basically I'm going to take these two reports and I'm going to put them on one spreadsheet. That's kind of the next step here. So here is my report, and I usually just like to name these just to keep them kind of straight in my head. That way I know exactly what data point I'm looking at and which spreadsheet I need to look at. Now, you can, once we get this other report that we need out of Coupa, which is right here, I'm going to just add a tab here, and I'm going to call it my on-hand balances. And I'm going to open up the report that Coupa sent me for my on-hand balances. And I'm basically just going to copy the data out of the Coupa report into this other spreadsheet that I'm working on. So I just copy the whole thing. And if you've never, I guess if you've never done that before, if you click this corner button, it's going to highlight your entire spreadsheet. And then you can right click and copy, or you can Control C. So both of those are options. I'm going to paste that. It's going to say it's different sizes, which is fine. Now, to make sure I can see all these, I'm going to highlight, and then I'm just going to double click, and it will basically make every column the appropriate size according to the information in the column. So now I have my bin max and I have my on-hand balance. So the next thing I want to do is I'm basically going to I'm going to create, like, this is now my order suggestion sheet. Okay. And I'm going to take my on-hand balance and I'm going to copy some of this information. And we're basically just going to create our own little spreadsheet. So I don't necessarily need to know what warehouse. So I'm going to delete that column. And I don't care how many are allocated necessarily. I care about how many are available, because this is what I truly need to look at. Now, when we're doing it this way, we're not able to take into consideration past orders. So just keep that in mind, is that when Coupa does replenishment, it's going to look and be like, hey, you have an open purchase order last week for 100 of these. When you're doing it this way, there is no way to do that unless a lot more work is involved. So again, this is just a shortcut method for when the replenishment program isn't necessarily working. So this is how many I have on hand. And then what I really want to do is I want to take some information from here and I want to add it to this spreadsheet. So I want to know what my min is and what my max are, but I can't just copy and paste because these are in different orders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a VLOOKUP. Okay. So a VLOOKUP basically says, I want you to look at this number and I want you to find that number on this spreadsheet. And then I want to take information from one of these columns over here and put it over here. Is the simplest way to describe a VLOOKUP. So we're going to do VLOOKUP. The lookup value is the thing I want it to search for, which is your first number over here. And then your second lookup value is your array. So your array is what portion of that other spreadsheet do you want it to search for this number? So we're going to say, I want it to search these 5 columns because I want it to look here for the number. And this is the information I want it to pull over into my other sheet, is the minimum order quantity, right? So then I do a comma and it gives me my next, which is the column index number. So this basically is saying, okay, once I find the number over here, what column do you want me to pull from to put that information in? So in this case, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the 5th column. And then, so I do a 5, I do a comma, and then it's going to ask me the lookup range. Do I want something that's close to that number or do I want something exact? In almost all cases that I personally use VLOOKUP, I always do exact, which is a 0. So you put a 0 in for true, and then you finish your parentheses and hit enter. Now notice it just pulled my max on hand, or my minimum order is 200. Now, if I want to apply this formula to this whole column, I can just put my mouse here with the little plus sign and double click, and it basically pulls all of the minimum on my minimum reorder quantity into this spreadsheet. Okay. So below minimum. So my next thing is how many items are below the minimum. This is what's going to tell me what I need to order, because what I have on hand is below my minimum par. And honestly, it's kind of silly. It's just a sum table. So you're basically just subtracting, because I'm going to take my minimum and I'm going to subtract my available balance. and I'm going to finish my parentheses and hit enter. And then I am going to double click that, right? So it pulls all the way down the column. And then the next step, I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to add a filter because I only want to see things that are greater than 0. Right? Because if it's negative, it means I have more on hand than my minimum. So I hit OK. Here's my order for today. That's about as simple as it gets. Now, let's say there's things on here like, oh man, I don't want to order Starbucks today. Okay, well, how do I know which item is looking at which supplier? So I can do a couple of different things. When I start this over on my min max, I can just delete the suppliers that I don't need. Or once I complete this work, I can do one more column and I can call it the supplier and I can do another VLOOKUP. So if I do VLOOKUP and I look for this item number, right? And I look for this item number over here in this table and I hit a comma and then what column do I need it to look at? Well, I want to pull the supplier info. So I say column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 0 because I want the item number to match exactly, and my parentheses, and hit enter. It's going to pull in my supplier number here that matches this. I'm going to apply that to the whole thing. And now I can even go so far as to add a filter, right, to that column as well. As you notice, like when we did the VLOOKUP, it only applied it to the ones that we had filtered. So if you want it to apply to all of them, you can just drop and drag this down and it'll apply to everything on the list. The next thing is if I just want to see certain suppliers, I just add my filter. I only want to order Cisco today. That's all the Cisco stuff. And again, I only want to see things that are greater than 0. So these are the items that I would order from Cisco today. So that is how you can that's another trick you can use to kind of replace replenishment. Again, it's not going to take into consideration things you have on order, but this at least gets you a lot closer so you're not having to manually review every single item. And then you would basically just go and put these in your cart and check out like normal almost. Okay. Do you guys have questions?
I do have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So once we get to this point, would we not want to compare the available against the maximum to determine the order quantity?
Yeah, you can. Yes, to determine how much you want to order. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So the next step, like once you kind of determine this, I know a lot of our, depending on how well you know your warehouse, I know a lot of people might know how much they need to order. If you want the system to tell you how much you need to order, that's again, so I need to know my max par, right? So I'm going to use my VLOOKUP again. And I'm going to say, I want to look at this number. I want to look over at this table. And this time I'm going to the max column, comma, and then what's my max column? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Want it to match true, so 0. I finish out that's my max par. And then again, it's simple subtraction or addition. So I say, okay, this is what I have on hand and this is my max. So I'm going to take my max par and I'm going to subtract to the available balance and complete that. And this is what I order. So those will be the quantities that you order. And it took me a long time to VLOOKUP it's like it's the coolest formula. I'm telling you guys, like it's such a time saver, but it definitely takes some getting used to. And, you know, obviously this is recorded, so you guys can go back. You can use VLOOKUP for a lot of different things, not just warehouse replenishment help. But this at least can kind of do some of a lot of that calculations for you if replenishment is ever not working appropriately. And you need kind of this, you need some help in determining what to order that day. So, and I think Rob, you might be typing a question. Do you guys have other questions? No? Okay. Well, cool. I hope this helps. And we'll post it on the YouTube channel too.